Young Turks. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur. I am in a strange mood as I was yesterday. So I will start with a strange story as I did yesterday. In the studio here, we were having a debate right before we came on air. Philly or Pittsburgh sandwiches. First of all from the great state of Pennsylvania. I vote against fries in sandwiches. JR also voted against this. Skip, our stage manager today, voted in favor because he's from that area. You guys have great football teams, but the French fries and sandwiches. But overall, I lose America points because Americans put French fries in sandwiches needlessly. And then Skip made a great point. In Pittsburgh, they put French fries on salad. You know what that is? Elbow from the sky, America.
There's a simple remedy. Order some fries, order your sandwich. And if you'd like fries in really a mouth while you have a sandwich, jam both, it's okay. You'll get the same effect.
I don't know. I think we're losing that one, JR. I'm just keeping it real, man. Okay, second random thing. Don't miss the show next week. Interesting. Just don't miss it. I'll leave it at that. We're going over here. Okay, who would have thought that I would be applauding a speech from George W. Bush for its bravery, for its correct description of America and its ideals? Wow, the world is topsy-turvy. So this is fascinating for a number of reasons. He never mentioned the word Donald Trump, but his speech on Thursday clearly directed against Donald Trump and in very strong words. This is a former Republican president. Listen in.
We've seen our discourse degraded by casual cruelty. At times, it can seem like the forces pulling us apart are stronger than the forces binding us together. Argument turns too easily into animosity. Disagreement escalates into dehumanization. Too often, we judge other groups by their worst examples, while judging ourselves by our best intentions, forgetting the image of God we should see in each other. We've seen nationalism distorted into nativism, forgotten the dynamism that immigration has always brought to America. We see a fading confidence in the value of free markets and international trade, forgetting that conflict, instability, and poverty follow in the wake of protectionism. We've seen the return of isolationist sentiments, forgetting that American security is directly threatened by the chaos and despair of distant places, where threats such as terrorism, infectious disease, criminal gangs, and drug trafficking tend to emerge. In all these ways, we need to recall and recover our own identity. Americans have great advantage. To renew our country, we only need to remember our values.
Wow, and it's about to get much tougher as well, but lots of tough words already in there. When he starts talking about bullying and how it leads to casual cruelty, gee, I wonder who he's referring to. When he talks about isolationist sentiments, that is clearly Donald Trump. Then he said nationalism distorted into nativism. Now this is the same language that John McCain used just a couple of days ago when talking about the movement from the 1930s that turned nativist and turned inward and against immigrants. And George Bush there talking about the dynamism immigration has always brought to America. So this is clearly broadsides against Donald Trump, but he probably won't respond on Twitter. So we'll see how that goes. No Trump response yet, but Bush has got more where that came from. And I never thought I'd miss this guy. Not in a million years did I think I'd miss him. And yes, he still looks goofy, but the words are important. And I'm super glad that he came out to give this speech. He gave the speech at the same place that Obama also gave a speech in September, also warning about the same themes, also not mentioning Donald Trump. My favorite part of the clip you just saw was when he talked about forgetting the image of God we should see in each other, saying don't be cruel to one another and don't go in a direction of bigotry. But more clear words from Bush here.
We need a renewed emphasis on civic learning in schools, and our young people need positive role models. Bullying and prejudice in our public life sets a national tone, provides permission for cruelty and bigotry, and compromises the moral education of children. The only way to pass along civic values is to first live up to them.
Damn, talking about how bullying is cruel and leads to bigotry. Same themes as McCain. Remember, Corker came out and started speaking out against Donald Trump. I think there is a movement afoot here. And now understand Bush is out of office. McCain is not going to run for re-election. Neither is Corker. These are the guys who have been liberated to say things that are true and are not tied to the Republican base as much anymore, and not tied to the donors as much anymore. The donors still looking forward to those giant tax cuts that Trump is promising, but there are apparently some sane voice in the Republican Party saying we have to act, and perhaps act in unison. That, I think, is the most interesting part. But one more great clip from Bush. Who would have thought I would have said that sentence on the Young Turks? But anyway, here, watch.
Our identity as a nation, unlike many other nations, is not determined by geography or ethnicity, by soil or blood. Being an American involves the embrace of high ideals and civic responsibility. This means that people of every race, religion, ethnicity can be fully and equally American. It means that bigotry or white supremacy in any form is blasphemy against the American creed.
Blasphemy against the American creed. God bless you, George W. Bush. Wow, the world is so insane right now that Bush is the voice of reason. Bush used to be the crazy right wing. Now he's trying to calm the country down and saying, wait. Turns out it gets way crazier. And we cannot allow and encourage this kind of white supremacy. We cannot give it room. It is blasphemy against the American creed. I read the whole John McCain speech from a couple of days ago. These are very similar themes. America is not about blood and soil. It's about an idea. Look, I mean, they sound like me. I'm sure that they don't know that, don't get me wrong. But I love the American idea. I think that's what we need to defend. And for these Republicans to turn around and say that the guy in charge now, and George Bush did not come out to give a random speech about bigotry and white supremacy and how bad it is for America and nationalism and nativism out of the thin blue air. He didn't do it as a broadside against a random congressman. No, he is clearly, as John McCain was, talking about Donald Trump. So I wonder if there is something we don't know within Republican circles, because that's 3 strikes. That is 3 different people all singing the same tune, and it is possible that Republican leaders have looked around and said, this guy is totally unstable. And we can't say that publicly because our base will rip us apart, but we got to go find leaders in our party who can say it publicly. So here comes Corker, here comes McCain, here comes George W. Bush, and I don't think we've seen the last of it. What little conscience the Republican Party has might be acting out here. And of course, don't expect the courage of Republicans who are up for re-election to actually show up. If that does, that means Trump is already done. They're not going to say anything publicly unless they've already decided that they're done with him, and that would be a huge moment. But at least for them to send out these elders of the party and people not going to face the voters or the donors anymore, and to say that Trump is heading us towards bigotry, white supremacy, nativism, and that we should not go down that road, we should protect the idea of America, that is a giant turning point. And yes, for that I will give old adversaries, John McCain, even Bob Corker, and even George W. Bush a world of credit. Okay, now, could you imagine if Republicans actually put patriotism and country above party? I mean, if that is the beginning, that would be the most shocking turn of events. Okay, now let's move to the next story. Okay. Well, we've been telling you a lot about strange weather events. It's almost as if someone or a whole a set of folks predicted this, maybe a whole category of profession called scientists. Well, we got hit by hurricane after hurricane. We got the droughts that led to the terrible wildfires in Western United States. And now we have what is being called an atmospheric river. What in the world does that mean? Well, you're about to see. It is a 5,000-mile long belt of rain. What in the world? Let me show it to you. It stretches from China to the United States. It is a 5,000-mile belt of storms. What have we done to the planet? Jesus, man. They have these both cool and scary phrases for this. It's also called rivers in the sky because it's so long and it's obviously rain and moisture in the air and so intense that it has formed a river in the sky. Oh my God, what have we done? So now this is not the first time that we've had this. There was one back in 2009. It is not a sign of good things to come. If we start to have these more frequently and more intensely, I don't know how that it could get more intense than a 5,000-mile belt of storms, but this is picking up momentum, man. Yes, climate change makes a difference. Yes, they told you that the warm air would pick up moisture from both the ground, causing droughts and wildfires, and from the ocean, and it would create bigger storms. How's a 5,000-mile storm for you? Another thing that scientists that are tracking this call this is the big dark. Because for 5,000 miles, there's nothing but clouds in that belt, and it's the big dark, and it is headed in our direction. Well, it's already hit the state of Washington. Let me tell you about that. At least one city in Washington set a daily record for precipitation Wednesday, and Seattle was expected to have its wettest 24-hour period since February. Think about that for a second. It's not like the state of Washington isn't already wet. It's known in America as the wettest area in America. It rains all the time. We just broke a record in the state of Washington for precipitation. Gee, I wonder if there's something going on here. I wonder if the scientists were all right that we are going to have more precipitation and more storms. More from the state of Washington. Strong wind gusts knocked out power to more than 54,000 people in Western Washington. And a ground delay was temporarily placed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. According to King 5 TV, ferry services were temporarily closed as well. Look, the stories that I'm reading, I don't know if they're afraid to make the connection. Will they seem non-neutral? Do they need to have 17 scientists on the record to talk about it? But not a lot of talk of climate change. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I can see it with my own eyes. The scientists predicted that we would have massive storms. Now we have 5,000 miles of storms, the big dark. And people are wondering, oh, well, that might be a shame if climate change happens later. Son, you're in climate change. You're in it right now. What more do you need? Do you need a 10,000-mile storm? We had how many hurricanes hit? Harvey, Irma, Maria, and those are the ones that just happened to hit US territories. And then the wildfires that was raged for months in Montana, let alone the devastation they did in California, and now the big dark. Yes, it's climate change. Not one storm or weather pattern can be directly connected, and you say, okay, well, it rained today, it must be because of climate change. No, but overall, when you look at the macro picture and you see the intensity of these storms, it is exactly what was predicted. In fact, it is coming quicker, heavier, and much more intense than even scientists expected. If this is what we get this year, wait till you see next year. Brace for impact. Okay, now I'm gonna go to good news. Okay. So we've been telling you about this wonderful couple. They decided to do it that in their wedding, they would do a gift to Wolfpack as part of the wedding registry. Now I'm going to tell you about how that has begun to catch on in America now, which I love. I'm also going to tell you about something that happened in Massachusetts related to Wolfpack that I think that is super inspirational. Okay, so first, this is the website that you can go to donate for the wedding registry. Obviously, that goes to Wolfpack to fight to get money out of politics. wolf-pack.com/wedding. If you don't remember, it's let me show you the pictures. It's Rebecca Chan and Justin Hayashi who did this wonderful act in what we're calling the red, white, and blue wedding. Man, that looks lovely. God bless their hearts. Those are real Americans right there. And so then we said, you know what, guys? Why don't we go further here and actually encourage others to do it? And we said, email in if you'd like to do it more, together at wolf-pack.com. And guess what people did? They started emailing in and going, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing. I love this country and I love you guys. So together at wolf-pack.com if you want to participate. And if you're doing it, by the way, you can do #WolfPackWedding. And so now let me show you more people that have begun to do it. So here is Ryan and Amanda Metropolis, and they said, we're getting married. We're going to put it in our wedding registry. wolf-pack.com/wedding, okay? And then Gabby and Andrew from Boston, they're doing it. And then Skip from Washington said, hey, you know what? I'm not getting married. I'm 50. I'm 50, brother. Well, you know what? I'm about to have a 50th birthday. I want people to give to Wolfpack instead of, and by the way, you also can give Skip other presents too. Okay, and all these lovely people getting married as well. But wolf-pack.com/wedding, even if you're doing birthdays or anything else along those lines. There are patriots in America. They want to get the money out, and you do it through small donors, and that's exactly what Wolfpack's doing. And so you know we're fighting in all these different states, and we've already got it passed in 5 states. What we need is 34 states to call for a convention so we can get that amendment, go around Congress so we don't need Congress, okay? So now we're fighting in Massachusetts. That's a state we don't have yet, but I think we will. And they decided they were gonna have a committee hearing. First of all, I want to give credit to the Wolfpack sponsor, Representative Carmen Gentili, who testified there, bless his heart. There's a lot of great Americans I want to give credit to there. Also, chair of the committee, Representative John Mahoney, who was a Wolfpack co-sponsor. And guess what happened? People started showing up. And all of a sudden, there was 60 people in a committee hearing when normally committee hearings are not really lighting the place up, right? And so, there's some folks testifying there that you can see. And then one of the folks that were testifying was Matt Mazzola. He is our organizing director in Massachusetts. So he's not a politician. He's not a lobbyist. He's Matt Mazzola from Massachusetts. And he went, and guess what happened? All the representatives heard from him. That's how democracy is supposed to work. I know it's amazing what it does, and it almost never does on the national level, but at the state level, a guy who actually cares and says, hey, you know what? If we have private financing of elections, they will work for private interests. Why don't we do something else? Why don't we do election reform? Why don't we get the money out? And they're like, all right, Matt, go step up to the plate, and he did. And then they did a fun meetup afterwards in Boston after the committee hearing. 40 showed up from our side, and then there was another group, We the People Massachusetts, that had another 20 folks show up, and then they all went and had a drink together. But mainly, I want to tell you about this next person. That's Erica Gewurz. There she is. And Erica has great anxiety. She has epilepsy. So she has great anxiety, and it makes her hard to participate with the team. But she cares so much about this issue, so she wanted to testify in a public hearing. It takes tremendous courage. And she wound up collapsing in front of the whole crowd. You know what she did afterwards? She got up. She got up and testified and said, I want to get the money out because I'm afraid the insurance companies are going to control the legislators. And if I lose my insurance, I could die. I don't want that. I want you guys to represent me, the voters, the public, not the people financing the elections. It's people like that, like Erica, that are going to save this country, and all the people who are doing weddings, birthdays, etc. So bless her heart. And you get these inspirational stories every once in a while, and I'm amazed by them. There was the woman in New York who had a broken back and was making calls from her hospital bed. There was the person who, again, had incredible shyness, but gathered up the courage for the first time to go and speak to legislators. There's somebody who was disabled and they couldn't get out. So they said, all right, well then I'm gonna make more phone calls than anybody's ever made for Wolfpack in North Carolina. So join us, wolf-pack.com/states. And that's how you volunteer. You find out how you can help in your own state, whether it's Massachusetts, that's happening right now, whether it's states like New Mexico and Hawaii that were so close last year, New Hampshire. There's so many of these states where we're on the edge. It is truly nonpartisan. We're getting a lot of Republicans to vote with us as well. They don't like crony capitalism. They know that you need election reform. 93% of the country agrees. That means a whole ton of Republicans and Democrats and libertarians and liberals and moderates, everyone. They say that unfortunately right now the politicians represent the donors and not the voters. And we've got to change that if we've got to bring our democracy back. So for this particular campaign, we're trying to get to $100,000 so that Wolfpack can launch the next mission. And we'll tell you about that mission, and that mission is going to be super exciting. And it's going to involve really going after some people and making sure that their voice is heard and their power is used. So wolf-pack.com/wedding. It started as a red, white, and blue wedding for the people who are serving the big donors. It might end up in just a red wedding. Let's see how that turns out. But let's get them to $100,000. They're already over 10% of what they need to raise. Let's get them to 20, 30%. I'd love to see 20,000 by the end of the week. So wolf-pack.com/wedding. All of you guys participating in this, you inspire me. It's amazing what you guys have built, and together we're gonna win. We're gonna get that amendment, and we're gonna get our democracy back. We'll be right back. I'm going to rule against Siri.
Okay.
I don't use Siri. No one actually uses Siri. And every time you press that button for a little too long,
I know.
Siri, how can I help you? Just shush. It happened earlier in the post game. I don't know if you
so
noticed.
over Siri. So over. And also,
Siri's kind of a bitch.
You know what? She is kind of a bitch.
Okay,
you know why? Okay, first of all, no one enjoys or is excited about setting their alarm clock to 6 a.m. But you know who is excited? Fucking Siri.
She just asked me that.
Oh.
She's like, do you want me to set your alarm clock for 6:30 a.m.? Like, no, I don't.
No, watch. Yeah, she's fucking eager to do it. Like, she's a weirdo. Watch. Set my alarm for 4 a.m.
I don't think
I didn't find any appointments for tomorrow at 4 a.m. Shall I?
You know you're on air, bitch. Like, that's what's going on. Okay,
she's
but
like,
usually
I shall now fuck with you.
So usually I'll be like, set the alarm for 6 a.m. She'll be like, okay, I turned it on. And it's like, why are you so excited?
Hey Cenk, what's up?
Aaron, I want to do a YouTube live clip, but not live. Go.
Welcome back to TYT Sports. Jason and Francis here. This is where everybody has to listen. Welcome to TYT Sports, everybody. I am your host, Francis Maxwell. Jason here. Welcome to TYT Sports. Turks and Jerks. TYT Sports.
Steph Curry signed with Under Armour.
Tom Brady's mad, by the way.
Do you hear me? Back on TYT Sports!
Actually, leave a link in the description box below instead of lying about leaving a link in the description box below.
Editor, throw up another picture of the UK bacon. And another. Then if I throw in another one.
Let me see your belly.
Beast mode.
All right, back on the Young Turks, host Cenk Uygur, that's me. Chris Huck, he's one of our own, he's in Pittsburgh, and he says, Primanti's puts fries and coleslaw on sandwich because they were made for truckers so they could eat a complete meal with one hand. Hashtag America. God bless Pittsburgh, man. Pittsburgh's is such a great city. I think it's the most American city. I said it. Dances With says about Bush's speech, there's no way he wrote that, but is nice he said it out loud. Now, of course, and he can't help himself. He's still goofy, so he'll do the and fight against bigotry. And you're like, okay, no, don't make silly faces in the middle of a good speech, right? But I'll take it. It's a good speech. Admiral Morrison says, I'm praising George W. Bush. I feel sullied and unusual. I hear you, brother. Digital Shart says, nothing makes sense anymore. The Murphy, which is a fun name, says Republicans know Trump will have long-lasting damage to their party, can't risk future elections. When W makes sense, it's bad. You're right, they are partly doing it for future electoral victories. But once again, I'll take it. Anyone on the right side of this issue and fighting against Trump and his bigotry is a good ally to have for now. So God bless. Lynn Laura finally says about the dark, what was it? The Big Dark. Sharknado is starting to seem more and more plausible, but not in a funny way. More like winter comes and we all die, Game of Thrones style. Right, we almost call that story about the 5,000-mile river in the sky. River is coming. All right, speaking of what's coming, real quick, notice for you guys, good folks at PCCC, that's the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, are doing a virtual town hall tonight. Check it out at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, that's 5:30 Pacific. What they're doing is they're having three great candidates, Randy Bryce, Katie Porter, and Andy Kim, progressives running for office, and you get to ask them questions, which is pretty neat. So RSVP at press@boldprogressives.org, press@boldprogressives.org, and ask those folks some questions. Make sure that they're on your side and fighting for you, and I think they are. All right, we're over here. Does anybody even remember the movie 10 with Bo Derek in it? Okay, you're gonna see why we did this graphic. So Donald Trump was talking about very serious issues. He started talking about uranium in Russia. That's another story, and I'll cover that as well. But before we get to the serious stuff, let's have a little bit of fun. He was asked about how the federal government reacted to the hurricane recovery efforts in Puerto Rico. How did they do? Now, what would a normal president say? They'd say, look, our hearts are heavy for the people who suffered in Puerto Rico, and I think we're doing the best we can, and I'm proud that we sent, X amount of, and you would name a number of factors, number of people we sent, trucks we spent, supplies we sent, et cetera. But it's never enough, and we're gonna keep on fighting to make sure that they deliver, right? Stuff like that. Here's what Trump said instead.
Between 1 and 10, how would you grade the White House response so far today?
I'd say it was a 10. I'd say it was probably the most difficult. I give ourselves a 10, but we have provided so much, so fast. We had the Coast Guard waiting for the storm, just outside the storm, and following the storm in. Army, Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, helicopters that weren't even meant for this purpose. So we would have the military driving trucks. It's not even their aptitude. Didn't really know how to drive trucks, but they learned very quickly. They're smart. The gentleman who worked for Bill Clinton when he was president gave us an A+, gave us an A+. I really believe he's correct. We have done a really great job.
The military, they don't know how to drive trucks. They don't know it, but they figured it out because that's how good Donald Trump is. 10 out of 10. And they were all around there. And the gentleman that worked for Bill Clinton gave us an A+, whose name I obviously didn't bother to remember, even though he gave us an A+. Okay, but this is not the first time that Donald Trump has given himself a 10. We found one other instance. Here it is.
I gave it a 10. A 10. A fucking 10.
We have a goofball for a president. How would I grade myself? A 10, a 10. Unfortunately, he's a dangerous goofball. Otherwise, it'd be a lot of fun. Guys, it's not a reality show. He's actually the president of the United States. God help us. Okay, a 10. All right, we're moving forward. This is just a show story. Okay, interesting purge going on at the DNC. Now, when Tom Perez won, he was backed by the entirety of the establishment, mainly pushed by Barack Obama. They wanted to make sure that Keith Ellison didn't win. Keith Ellison had supported Bernie Sanders, and he was a progressive, and they didn't want that. So they sent in Tom Perez, and they said, oh, yeah, no, I mean, he's done some things at labor. He's fine, he's a good progressive, don't worry about it. And it was a hard-fought battle, and they played super dirty, and they had some terrible charges that they put out about Keith Ellison. I don't want to repeat them. Now, they never do that to Republicans, but when it was progressives, they knew how to fight dirty. Against progressives, obviously, if you're there, because they're the Democratic establishment. Now, at the time, though, after he won, they said, oh, kumbaya, Keith Ellison is gonna join as vice chair, it's okay. We got a Unity Reform Commission, it's gonna do reforms, we're gonna unify, we're gonna bring in some Bernie Sanders people, not as much as Hillary Clinton people. Okay, I get it, she won the primary, and so whatever you do, don't worry, okay? This is all together, hold hands. Not anymore. Now, all of a sudden, it looked like it was a fun wedding until they took out the daggers and it turned into a red wedding, or in this case, maybe a blue wedding. So let me tell you what happened next. NBC News reporting, a shakeup is underway at the Democratic National Committee as several key longtime officials have lost their posts, exposing a still raw rift in the party and igniting anger among those in the progressive wing. Now, look, they're gonna get rid of a bunch of Ellison and Bernie supporters. I'm gonna tell you all about that. But the most important thing is why NBC News did not report that, but I will. Okay, but let me give you more details about what happened here. Complaints began immediately after party officials saw a list of Perez's appointments to DNC committees and his roster of 75 at-large members who are chosen by the chair. So he has a new list. He gets rid of a bunch of people in very important committees and gives in new people. Okay, the removal and demotion of a handful of veteran operatives stood out, as did what critics charge is the overrepresentation of Clinton-backed members on the Rules and Bylaws Committee, which helps set the terms for the party's presidential primary. Here we go. So when everybody was looking and there was a big interesting race going on, oh, kumbaya. Now people are not looking as much, and so now all of a sudden, the Rules Committee gets to make the decisions on what the Unity Reform Commission suggests. So the way that they worked is, so unity, we're gonna bring it together, but it's okay, we're gonna do reform. Now, they're about to make their recommendations, they just had a meeting in Vegas, but their recommendations goes to the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee now has nothing but Clinton supporters. So they could take those recommendations and go, oh, so glad you helped us do that kabuki theater about unity. Oh, look at these funny reforms. Yeah, no, we're not doing that, okay? So let me tell you who got purged at these different committees and some that were at large members. Ray Buckley, the New Hampshire Democratic chairman and longtime DNC official who ran against Perez for chair before backing Representative Keith Ellison. Buckley lost his spots on the executive committee and the DNC Rules Committee. Oh, you backed Ellison? No, we can't have you on the Rules Committee. They're gonna make the decisions. Now, one of those decisions is really important. Again, NBC, great job in reporting this, but they don't have the next layer as to why, okay? One of the decisions then affects the executive committee. So the Rules Committee makes the decisions about what the rules are gonna be, but it might turn out that the Unity Reform Commission suggests that the budget actually be seen by the executive committee. Now, this is unbelievable. If you don't know how the DNC works, and honestly, I didn't until recently, until after the election, and we began to dive into this. It turns out that there's only 2 people who are allowed to see the entirety of the DNC budget. So you guys all give money, and you think it's gonna go to a good cause. And then Tom Perez, the chair, that's why they needed the chair. The chair can see the budget. The chair controls the budget, and the treasurer. And that's it, nobody else is allowed to see the budget. What, okay, now they might say, okay, hey, listen, man, we can't have the riffraff looking at our budget. I don't know that I agree with that, but at least there's some logic into, hey, wait, I don't want this to be public, okay? But at least some other folks should look at it at the DNC, right? Not, okay, I would argue all the DNC members, but they say, no, it can leak and we don't want it public, et cetera. But at least the executive committee, right? And right now the answer is no. So some folks on the Reform Commission are saying, let the executive committee see the budget. Why do they care about the budget? Because it's about the money, Lebowski. So the guys who are actually controlling the Democratic Party, when we say Clinton people, it's largely Democratic consultants. They're the ones making all the money. They're the ones that take your money, decide where it goes. And you're gonna be shocked to find out that a lot of it goes straight into their pockets. Gee, I wonder why they don't want anybody else to see the budget. So the Reform Commission suggested to the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee is now all Clinton people and it might kill it. But if it doesn't kill it and it passes it and then all of a sudden Perez, the chair, has to show the budget and how the money is spent to the executive committee, well then I got to get rid of the people in the executive committee who are Ellison people. So all of a sudden they're gonna get purged. Ray Buckley, you ran for head of the whole organization. You've been part of this for 20 years. You're the chair of the New Hampshire Democratic Party, which is enormously important. Gone. Unity, my ass, you're gone. We can't have you people looking at the real numbers. James Zogby, the president of the Arab American Institute and prominent Sanders backer, is no longer co-chair of the Resolutions Committee and is also off the executive committee, a spot he has held since 2001. You've been there for decades, you've been there for the Democratic Party, but you made one mistake, you backed Bernie Sanders. Now the executive committee, if they're gonna look at the budget, we can't have anybody from Bernie's team looking at the budget, you're gone. It's gonna be fascinating to see what Keith Ellison does here. Because Keith Ellison will still be part of the executive committee because he's in the vice chair role, a role that they made up for him. So is he gonna say, oh, okay, I guess you took out all my guys, that's fine. Keith, when they came for James and they came for Ray and they came for all these other people, what did you do? So I don't know if he's gonna play ball. I don't know. I have no idea. I didn't talk to him. I don't know. On the one hand, he could stay and he would have access to the budget, and maybe if there are issues, he could tell us. On the other hand, it doesn't look like anyone is left on those committees that the Clinton people don't trust. I can't believe the Clintons are still running the Democratic Party. She lost to Donald Trump and they still have a lock on it. Why? Because it's about the money. Okay, now more people who were taken out. Alice Drummond, the party's longtime former secretary and vocal Elsenbacher, who was removed from her large appointment to the DNC, she's gone. Barbara Casper Sipperstein, who supported Ellison and Buckley, was tossed from the executive committee. Man, lots of people leaving the executive committee, what a coincidence. Now, Alice Drummond says, it's quite unusual for a former party officer who's been serving on the DNC for forever to just be left out in the cold without even a call from the chairman. So I assumed it has something to do with my support for Keith. So yeah, if all the people that were removed were Ellison and Sanders people and all the people who replaced them were Clinton backers, gee, I wonder if that had something to do with it. I can't quite tell. And what is the one thing that the DNC, the Democratic establishment, loves to do? They love to hide behind minorities. So they say, oh no, what are you talking about? We've got a black millennial transgender person and we got some other, and I got all this diversity. Wait, is there diversity of opinions? I mean, if they're millennials, most of the millennials are Bernie Sanders supporters. Are they Bernie Sanders supporters? Well, no, but they're black, but they're transgender, etc. So which brings us back to Sipperstein. She made a good point. Sipperstein, the DNC's first transgender member, said, I can't speak for Tom, but you talk about diversity, I'm extremely diverse. Jewish, veteran, transgender, lesbian, grandparent, and small business owner. So maybe it wasn't really about diversity. Maybe they're actually hiding behind diversity because they don't want diversity of ideas. Unity only if you bow your head. And if you don't, there's a red wedding in your future. So all these folks got invited in to what seemed like was a unity event and come to find out that the Clintons send their regards. Well, I do have one last thing for them. The North remembers.
There's another side to this. Also, the DNC, I just read this yesterday, they're considering a resolution within the committee to get Angus King from Maine and Bernie Sanders, both independents, since they caucus with Democrats, to run as Democrats. Stop talking about this independent stuff. So part of it says this should be resolved that the DNC recognizes the important contributions of the independent senators, these two, and the draft also says they call on candidates and voters who share common goals and beliefs with Democrats to register or affiliate with the Democratic Party in 2017, 18, and beyond. So they can purge all of the people who support them within the committee, but then when they want them to run and have the heads and the faces, not have an I next to their name, but a D, so that they can continue to say, these diverse people that are behind them in voting blocks are with us. But within the committee, we don't really care what's actually happening with their values and the people that support them.
That's right. And then another huge vote is coming, and that is on whether they're going to accept corporate cash or not. Progressives are saying, no, we should be uncorrupted. You want to guess what the Tom Perez Clinton wing thinks? You know what they think. So they got to get ready for those votes and they got to keep that money flowing in and then out the door to those consultants. We're going to run those TV ads. We're going to take their 15%. We're going to take your hard-earned money that you gave to the Democrats and run inefficient, terrible campaigns that lose the Republicans over and over again. But hey, at least their kids went to private school. I assure you that the North remembers. Young Turks.
Hey, Jen, what's up?
Aaron, I forgot my email password. What is it?
PASSWORD.
Damn it, they failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong, because you should be angry. Young Turks.
It was genuine. He was mad.
Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, fade up.
I just remember thinking, what is this guy's name?
Cenk the Turk Uygur.
What kind of TV station is this?
The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It was right out of like Wayne's World.
This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power.
We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world.
We're celebrating our 1 billionth view.
Television, we're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC opportunity was an experiment.
If Phil and host beat CNN and headline news combined, at some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year, that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut up juice.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can, quote, support him.
He says to me, you won't believe the meeting that I just had.
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
And they want him off the air.
Cenk took an incredible risk.
We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media. The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it?
I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, I should be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close.
Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing a national show. I guarantee it.
All right, back on the Young Turks. The mathematician writes, I'd bet my mother's triple mortgage Ellison plays ball, Cenk. I have no idea. I don't know. Well, that's the great thing about politics, and not a lot of great things. One of them is we get to find out, isn't it? Okay, London Water says they love to sell people false hope also. Damn Dempublicans. Just Democrats, that's the way to go. justicedemocrats.com/go. They're doing a new fundraising campaign. They're trying to hit 40,000 by the end of the week. They already got to 60% of that. Can I see 100%? Justicedemocrats.com/go. All right, let's go over here. All right. So Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz had an interesting debate the other night. It was about taxes. The Republicans are planning to cut taxes to the bone for rich folks and multinational corporations. That's a fact. In fact, I'll give you one very specific fact. 80% of the tax cuts that they proposed are going to go to the top 1%. And then Ted Cruz got this, oh, this is for farmers and the middle class. No, it's not. It's literally not. The Tax Policy Center says 80% of the cuts are not going to go to the top 20 or 10%. They're going to go to the top 1%. It's unbelievable. Anyway, so I was surprised to see this headline from Mediaite. Justin Baragona writes, watch Bernie Sanders get caught off guard by audience members' response to CNN debate. Man, I was like, really? Did Bernie get caught flat-footed? He didn't know how to answer a tax question? So I'm now going to show you the clip where Bernie was caught off guard. Okay, prepare to be stunned at how Bernie was flat-footed on this. Of course not, watch this thing.
Senator Sanders, over my lifetime, all we've seen is more government and more expenses, cutting taxes from top to bottom or bottom to top, however you view it. Then we'll give some relief to the burdensome expenses all Americans face. Why would you not want a tax cut across the board for all Americans?
Well, I do want a tax cut for the middle class and working families. But when the top 1/10 of 1% now owns as much wealth as the bottom 90%, when you have a handful of people with incredible wealth and power, no, I'm afraid that I will not support tax breaks for billionaires. Now, I don't know if you were there when President Trump, were you there when President Trump came to Pennsylvania?
I was.
Yeah, and President Trump was touting, as I understand it, the repeal of the estate tax, something that Senator Cruz supports. That's why he was there, correct? Let's talk about the repeal of the estate tax. The only people who benefit from that are the top 2/10 of 1%. 99.8% of the people do not pay a nickel in estate taxes. Senator Cruz will tell you about all the farmers and the ranchers. Well, Ted, there are 80 of them in the United States. The overwhelming majority of beneficiaries of this estate tax that Trump was supporting are people like the Walton family. Do you really believe that the wealthiest family in America should get a tax break of up to $50 billion, that the Koch brothers should get a tax break of up to $30 billion? Do you think that makes sense?
I did say all Americans.
Well, do you think that the wealthy should not get tax breaks?
I did say all Americans.
Okay, well, I happen not to believe that the Koch brothers need a tax break.
Oh my God, they got him. I didn't know they got him that bad. So yeah, okay, so the guy disagrees and he thinks the Waltons, who by the way, it was their dad who created Walmart, not them. So they should receive another $50 billion in tax breaks. I read a stat last year that those 6 Waltons who inherited their money, what happened to bootstraps? Anyway, they inherited the money and those 6 Waltons have more money than the bottom 50% of the country. That's over 150 million people. 6 people have more, but they apparently need another $50 billion in taxes. The Koch brothers, this guy thinks, because he owns a trucking company, my guess is that he might be in the 0.2%, I don't know for sure. Or he thinks like, I'm gonna be in that 0.2%. Anyway, he thinks, no, yeah, the Koch brothers, they poor guys, they should probably get another $30 billion tax break. Okay, that's fine, God bless your heart, man. I don't think a lot of Americans agree. And they say, oh, Ted Cruz, of course, have to say, oh, it's gonna help the economy. What, the Koch brothers are gonna buy another yacht, another jet, and that's gonna help the economy? Every dollar that goes and breaks to the poor and the middle class gets spent almost immediately and recirculates in the economy and creates a bigger and bigger growth in the economy. That's great. Dollars that go to the richest people in the country, almost all of it gets saved, which means that it does not recirculate in the economy and does not create growth or jobs. They've been lying to you this whole time with this trickle-down economic nonsense. And no, Bernie was not caught flat-footed or off guard. He had a great answer as usual. It's amazing how they twist things. All right, now let's go to a bit of a shocking story. There's two shocking stories. One's terrible. I'm going to save that to the end. The next one is shocking because of who I kind of agree with. Okay. Now, Donald Trump, as usual, with some angry tweets and mean tweets, and a lot of people couldn't figure out what the hell he's talking about, but I did, and I hope you're prepared to be shocked. I think that he might be right about some of it. Whoa, okay, so let's explain. So here's his tweets. He says, uranium deal to Russia with Clinton help and Obama administration knowledge is the biggest story that fake media doesn't want to follow. He then says, quote, Russia sent millions to Clinton Foundation. And the third one is, workers of firm involved with the discredited and fake dossier take the fifth. Who paid for it? Russia, the FBI, or Dems, or all? So this is as usual sent at 4 in the morning. Does the guy ever sleep? I don't know, man. I'm worried about this guy. Of course, I'm worried about him in 1,000 different ways. Anyway, so people have no idea what he's, uranium, Russia, the FBI and the Democrats and the Russians working together in a collusion? What in the world are you talking about? So the reality is the Hill actually had an excellent report, and at least the first 2 tweets of his are actually fairly accurate. So let me break it down for you. They explain in the Hill, before the Obama administration approved a controversial deal in 2010, giving Moscow control of a large swath of American uranium, the FBI had gathered substantial evidence that Russian nuclear industry officials were engaged in bribery, kickbacks, extortion, and money laundering designed to grow Vladimir Putin's atomic energy business inside the United States, according to government documents and interviews. Now, before I give you more of this, I want to run one more video for you of Trump. Again, he's not great at the English language, so as he's lashing out and attacking the Obama administration in such a convoluted way, he didn't make clear what the point of that was, which is this story, which is a really interesting story. So let me show you what Trump is saying and then explain what parts are actually true. Here, watch.
Uranium is a big subject. If the mainstream media would cover the uranium scandal and that Russia has 20% of our uranium, for whatever reason, and a lot of people understand what those reasons may be, I think that's your Russia story. That's your real Russia story, not a story where they talk about collusion and there was none. It was a hoax. Your real Russia story is uranium and how they got all of that uranium, a vast percentage of what we have. That is, to me, one of the big stories of the decade, not just now, of the decade. The problem is that the mainstream media does not want to cover that story because that affects people that they protect. So they don't like covering that story. But the big story is uranium and how Russia got 20% of our uranium. And frankly, it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. And it's a disgrace that the fake news won't cover it. It's so sad.
Okay, so it is true about the 20%, as I'm going to show you from the story in the Hill. Oh, right. It's a story in the Hill, which is a mainstream news publication. So they did cover it. In fact, they're the ones who exposed it. And the New York Times had talked about it during the campaign. So what do you mean they don't cover it? The only reason you know about it is because they just covered it. So let me explain what that is, and I'll cover it for you. So they have more details on how the Russians got this and how portions of it were illegal. They also obtained an eyewitness account backed by documents indicating Russian nuclear officials had routed millions of dollars to the US designed to benefit former President Bill Clinton's charitable foundation during the time of Secretary of State Hillary Clinton served on a government body that provided a favorable decision to Moscow, sources told The Hill. These are sources inside the FBI. So of course Trump has some of this story wrong. If the FBI collaborated with the Russians and the Democrats, why are they telling you now about the Russians and the Democrats? So that part also makes no sense. But again, focus on the substance of the story because it is an important one and it is deeply concerning. The racketeering scheme was conducted with the consent of higher level officials in Russia who shared the proceeds from the kickbacks, one agent declared in an affidavit years later. So, by the way, a couple of things here. One is how this uranium got sold off and who got paid in kickbacks, etc. The other is why it was not prominently talked about while things were being approved. So we'll get to that as well. So more from the Hill. The first decision occurred, they're talking about two different decisions here that the Obama administration made. First decision occurred in October of 2010 when the State Department and the government agencies on the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States unanimously approved the partial sale of Canadian mining company Uranium One to the Russian nuclear giant Rosatom, giving Moscow control of more than 20% of America's uranium supply. So that's the 20% Trump's talking about, and that is true. They did do that, that's an absolute fact. Okay, now, it could have been that they did that and it was perfectly legitimate and there was no bribes or kickbacks or anything along those lines or nothing untoward, but as the Hill is reporting, that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like they might have gotten that through a lot of different methods and some of which were not legal. So here's the second action the Obama administration took. In 2011, the administration gave approval for Rosatom's Tenex subsidiary to sell commercial uranium to US nuclear power plants in a partnership with the United States Enrichment Corporation. So look, some of this is benign. Them selling them uranium to us, I don't think is a huge deal. I'm open to being proven otherwise on that, but I don't think that's a big deal. But as the Hill explains, some of the deals, including the trucking of the uranium, could have been a national security issue, okay? Now, and the fact that they have 20% of our uranium so that they could make, they could utilize that for a number of weapons. It's not like they don't have uranium from anywhere else, but again, it is clearly a potential national security issue, okay? And an anonymous source tells the Hill, the Russians were compromising American contractors in the nuclear industry with kickbacks and extortion threats, all of which raised legitimate national security concerns, and none of that evidence got aired before the Obama administration made those decisions. Some details on the kickbacks. The first kickback payment recorded by the FBI through its informant was dated November 27th of 2009, the records show. That's important because we know that they're doing kickbacks in 2009, but we approve those decisions in 2010 and 2011 afterwards. Okay, in evidentiary affidavits signed in 2014 and 2015, an Energy Department agent assigned to assist the FBI in cases testified that Mikorin, which is the main Russian involved here in this scheme, who was later arrested, supervised a quote racketeering scheme that involved extortion, bribery, money laundering, and kickbacks that were both directed by and provided benefit to more senior officials back in Russia. So there's serious wrongdoing going on here as well. And the Hill also reminds you, that's when conservative author Peter Schweizer in the New York Times documented how Bill Clinton collected hundreds of thousands of dollars in Russian speaking fees, and his charitable foundation collected millions in donations from parties interested in the deal while Hillary Clinton presided on the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. At a bare minimum, that is the appearance of corruption. I mean, don't take millions of dollars to your foundation while Hillary Clinton is a huge part of the decision on whether we sell off 20% of our uranium to the Russians. That's a terrible idea. But the only thing that's worse than that is taking hundreds of thousands of dollars and putting it in your own pocket, not to a charitable foundation, but in your own pocket, Bill Clinton, while Hillary Clinton is helping to make that decision. Even if it's not corruption, and boy, it certainly looks like it. Even if it's not, it certainly has the appearance of corruption. It makes people go, I wonder if they did something wrong. Especially knowing that Hillary Clinton knew from the day that Obama got elected that she was going to run again. If you think you're going to run for president again, why would you do that? Because they can't help themselves. The money, the money, the money. Okay, so Trump unfortunately is right that that is a deeply concerning issue. Now, that doesn't mean that his third tweet was right about how the FBI and the Democrats and Russia are somehow in cahoots over the dossier. Now, what the hell's the dossier? That's the dossier that the Russians apparently or allegedly prepared with compromising information about Donald Trump. And some of the parts of that dossier have already been proven correct. Others we don't know about. And so he takes the Uranium One story, which is true, and then says, and hence the dossier must not be true. No, that's not a hence at all. And there's a couple of Fusion GPS officials who were instrumental in ordering the production of that dossier who decided not to testify. Now that's curious in front of the House, in a private meeting in the House. That's interesting, and I think that's noteworthy, and we should look into that more. But that doesn't mean it has anything to do with the Uranium One deal. It doesn't mean it has anything to do with the Democrats. And remember, it's people in the FBI that are exposing all this either way. Now I'm going to suggest something to you that is both obvious to anyone else, but apparently not obvious to Donald Trump or the Democrats, or even most of cable news. Maybe the Russians wanted to work with the Clintons in case they won, but also wanted to have compromising materials and work with Trump in case he won. To which the rest of us go, of course they did. And by the way, have you noticed that Donald Trump has not authorized the sanctions on Russia? Now wait a minute, the House and the Senate voted overwhelmingly, 98-2 I think was the vote in the Senate, saying that the Russian sanctions should not be lifted. Why? Because Trump wanted to lift them. Since they were going to override his veto, Trump had to sign that into legislation. But has he actually continued to put those sanctions on Russia? Turns out the answer is no. So we go to Mother Jones. The White House has blown by an October 1st deadline for beginning to implement new sanctions targeting Russia, drawing concern in Congress that President Donald Trump is planning to ignore parts of a bill he grudgingly signed in August. Supposed to start on October 1st. Mother Jones wrote about that, I think, on October 11th. Here we are 10 more days later, roughly, and still hasn't imposed the sanctions. Wait a minute, you signed the bill, you're supposed to do it. The Treasury and State Departments also have not issued guidance on their plans for imposing the measure, as Senate aides said. They're not even planning to put the new sanctions in place. And Mother Jones reminds us that Trump opposed the new legislation, agreeing to sign it only after it became clear that Congress could override his veto, but he also issued a presidential signing statement suggesting he might ignore what he said were a number of clearly unconstitutional provisions in the legislation. In other words, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to pretend to do it, but here we are. It was supposed to be on October 1st, and many weeks later, he still hasn't put the sanctions on Russia. He never wanted to put the sanctions on Russia because he's working with Russia. I think that it is entirely possible that the Russians tried to influence both the Clintons and Trump in different ways. And I think that they had some success with the Clintons, unfortunately, under the Obama administration, or at least there's at a minimum, the appearance of success on that. And with Trump, it seems like they have had spectacular success. And no matter how much Congress demanded those sanctions and Trump signed it, still nothing. Gee, I wonder if you're actually worried that what's in the dossier is quite true, and that the Russians also have more information about you, and that's why you're not enforcing the sanctions. Okay, so who's guilty? The correct answer is both. Okay, now one last story for you guys. As usual, I go over. I thought I wasn't going to have enough today. Of course. Okay. Anyway. Now, this story is really sad. It's in a lot of ways heartbreaking, and it has a couple of twists and turns. So there was a flyer put up in a Cleveland State University that is devastating. So let me tell you about it. The flyer was posted last week on a billboard in CSU's main classroom building, according to Cleveland's Plain Dealer newspaper. It reportedly appeared the same day that the university's first LGBTQ center opened its doors. So now, I'm off the kids and ear off the kids because this is sensitive, terrible stuff, as you're kind of seeing on the graphic next to me, but let me show it to you in full. It talks about suicide in the LGBT community. It says 34% of trans people attempt suicide, 30% of suicides are LGBT related. Well, those are haunting stats, but they actually think that it's a good thing. And above a person hanging on a noose, it says, follow your fellow faggots. Wow. Man, there are some bad folks in this country. Okay, at the bottom of the poster, the words fascist solutions were printed. No individual or group has claimed responsibility. A similar flyer was spotted in Houston earlier this year. I don't. Oh, obviously, I don't know who did it. If we did, there might not be any consequences. So that's another interesting part of this story. They did take him down, but only because they said, the University Director of Communications and Media Relations said, because proper posting procedure was not followed. The reason it was taken down was because of posting etiquette at the university. Well, it turns out that the leaders of the university might believe that it is protected speech. They said if the flyer had been put up following the correct protocol, it would not have been taken down, Doobie told the Plain Dealer. According to the legal framework related to free speech, it would have been allowed. Wow. Then we go to Cleveland University's president, Ronald Berkman. He said, while CSU was fully committed to campus community that respects all individuals, the school was also committed to upholding the First Amendment, even with regard to controversial issues where opinion is divided. Wait, is opinion really divided on whether gay people should hang themselves? And whether we should unite around fascists who encourage members of the LGBTQ community to commit suicide? Is Cleveland State University really divided on campus on that issue? So look, I am very much in favor of allowing conservatives, even the most obnoxious, hateful conservatives, to speak on college campuses. I fervently believe in the First Amendment. I think some of the hate speech laws sometimes on campuses or rules cross a line, and I think that a lot more speech should be allowed than some groups argue for. But at some point, you do get to hate speech, and it does get to intimidate some other people in the community. You know, the old rule about your rights end at the bridge of my nose. So now they didn't actually hang any people, thank God. But when you encourage hangings, we're getting pretty close. So as Quartz and reports about the ACLU of Northern California, they explain that direct threats aren't protected by the First Amendment, but to count as a threat, speech has to incite imminent lawless action. Now, I don't know that this incites imminent lawless action, but boy, we're right on the edge there. And I don't know, they're a public university, and so they have to respect the First Amendment. It's not a private university. They can't set their own rules in that regard. But so that is one enormous issue, and I think it's a really interesting one. And I think that if anything was to be classified as hate speech, this would be right up there. And I think there's a great case to be made for that. The other thing is that, we've gotten so divided that people are putting up posters like this in this country. Wow. And by the way, unsurprisingly, they actually got the numbers wrong. It's actually worse than they said. A 2014 study found that 46% of transgender men and 42% of transgender women in the United States had attempted suicide, compared with just 4.6% of the overall US population. In a 2011 study, 44% of bisexual youth reported thinking about suicide at least once in the previous 30 days. Man, those are stunning numbers and horrible, haunting numbers. And I think all decent people would want to change that. I was just on a panel the other night with as transgender activists. And for you animals out there who are right-wing and think, oh, you know what, we should encourage them to hang themselves and they're not real people and they shouldn't have the same rights as us. I got news for you. Yes, they are fellow human beings. They are made of flesh and blood and they care and they have families, they have loved ones. To root for your fellow man to do that to themselves and to kill themselves, man, that is a level of hatred that is hard to comprehend. But here we are in the year 2017 in the United States of America. I hope that the rest of us can unite to say that this is ugly and we need to fight against it and protect our fellow humans. Shouldn't be too much to ask for. All right, guys. In the next hour, we got other folks coming in, including Brett and others who are going to talk to you about some interesting issues like France, the country of France, fining men. What are they fining them for? Something that used to happen all the time, but now is considered abhorrent. They'll tell you all about that. And new fun conspiracy theory to go much lighter about a body double for Melania. Interesting. Okay, and of course we've got a post game for you guys today as well. So tytnetwork.com/join, and you get the whole show plus the post game. And like I said, I'll be away tomorrow and in the second hour, but I'll be back next week. And don't miss the shows next week. Interesting, exciting announcements possibly. Let's see what happens. All right, see you soon.
Can we eat in here?
T-minus 1 minute till landing. TYT broadcast controllers, listen up. Give me a go, no go for landing. Sound?
Audio is hovering at minus 12 decibels.
Streaming?
We're go.
Camera crew?
We're go.
Mission control?
We're go.
Snacks?
We're good.
Iguana? Sir, we are go for landing. Okay, everybody. I want this to go off without a hitch.
Sir, I've been looking around this hour, and with the bandit firing now weeks old and waiting in
English, Johnson, English. What are you trying to tell me?
This joke isn't going to land, sir.
Okay, everyone. Forget the old plan. From this moment on, we're improvising a new joke.
So this is where the show started, and this is where it was supposed to end. Now the joke was supposed to land here, but that's not gonna happen, obviously. So we need to come up with a new joke. Maybe here?
Hits are dropping, streams are failing, retweets are stopping.
40 seconds.
All right, team. We gotta find a way to make this fit into a joke about this that will appeal to them.
30 seconds.
A Trump joke's our safest option.
Trying to land a Trump joke after this week's events is a suicide mission.
We are officially out of time. We need to act now.
Sir, I think our best course of action is to let Jink try to land a dad joke.
That's the deal?
That's the deal.
All right, everyone, to their stations.
Predator nations like Netherlands and Finland.
Cameras, position. Social media team. Race run follows. 10 seconds. As for the rest of us, all any of us can do now is wait and hope.
This is gonna be the worst disaster TYT has ever experienced.
With all due respect, sir, I think this will be the finest hour 2 yet.
Angela Merkel's government seems to have signaled pronounced.
Come on, Jink.
Everyone, it's been a pleasure streaming with you.
Greek Prime Minister immediately picked up the phone to Putin and said, "You Putin any money in?" Okay, anyway.
TYT crew, the joke has landed.
Turks, Hannah Cranston here with Brett Ehrlich and Ambria Allen. You guys know Brett from Pop Trigger. Ambria, what are you up to now?
I am up to stand up per usual, and you know, if you want to enroll in a class at UCLA, you can look for me on the course website.
That's a good sell.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna do some. Can I do some like extension classes now?
You can actually.
What are you teaching?
I teach like sociology of gender courses, gender and work, and some courses in the African American Studies department. Yeah. So.
Today I ate a full breakfast.
Oh,
it's my full.
Was it
my list of
square?
accomplishments. It's a square meal, but nothing nearly as impressive as what you just laid down.
Well, you know.
Right?
Yeah, well, that's the benefits of working as a professor at a university. You could do that too.
I doubt it.
Yeah,
I think you could.
Someday.
You got the look.
Yeah, I have one of those like shoulder, like elbow pad professor jackets.
Oh, then you're ready.
That's it.
That's all you need.
Yeah, and be flustered, and you're fine.
Yeah, I have like the NPR stammer down. Sort of. I say sort of a lot instead of
instead of an actual, yeah. You're in there.
I think you're ready.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, well, we are gonna be talking more about some things at universities today to start this hour off, but we have a ton of great stories for you guys. We're gonna talk about the fact that Breitbart and InfoWars are trying to blame the California wildfires on an interesting suspect. And we are going to talk about a weird conspiracy theory going around that Melania Trump has a body double. So stick around. But first, for our biggest story of the day, let's talk about Richard Spencer. Alt-right and neo-Nazi leader Richard Spencer spoke at the University of Florida today, but unfortunately due to protests, his speech got cut a little short and he was upset that he was being booed. Now, Florida had been preparing for this event for the entire week and for weeks to come up to this speech. In fact, on Monday, Florida Governor Rick Scott declared a state of emergency where the university is located to enable law enforcement agencies to work together more efficiently. He also made a provision for the National Guard to be activated if necessary. Now, the university prepared for the event as well. In fact, University of Florida President W. Kent Fuchs denounced Spencer's white supremacist platform as abhorrent in a letter to students, but said that the school could not stop him from renting the Phillips Center for the event because it's a public university. Now, by law, the school also has to pay for any additional costs of security. And given the heightened concerns, the school is providing extra security that exceeds $600,000, which is a lot of money, and taxpayers are going to have to pay for that because it's a public university. The president said, I really don't believe that's fair that the taxpayer is now subsidizing through these kind of events, the security, and having to subsidize his hate speech, all right? Now, leading up to the event, Richard Spencer was aware that the state of emergency was enacted. He was aware of the police and the protesters that were preparing, and he was eating it up. In an interview with CNN, he said that he was flattered by the state of emergency declaration, which he said put him on par with hurricanes and invading armies and zombie apocalypses, which just tells you what kind of swell guy he is. And so Richard Spencer is obviously a douchebag, one, and two, a huge proponent of
confirmed. Confirmed. I can confirm.
Checks out. A huge proponent of freedom of speech, right? That's what they try. They use that as a guise for their hate speech, right? But what's interesting, though, is in preparation for this event, Richard Spencer hand-selected the press that was allowed into the event so that he could control the spin that was being played for his speech. Reporters who had signed up to cover Spencer's event received an email on Wednesday from the university telling them that all media credentialing decisions are made by the NPI, which refers to the National Policy Institute, which is the neo-Nazi think tank that is run by Spencer. So that's a very interesting twist in this story, and I definitely want to get into that because I do think that that's sort of ironic given what Spencer stands for and the the conversation that he has around free speech. But first, I want to show you guys a video from the national reporter from the HuffPost. He was in the auditorium when Spencer was speaking, and you can hear students chanting, "Go home, Spencer." In other videos, you can hear them chanting that Nazis are not welcome here. And Spencer's response is kind of interesting. Take a look.
The most important free speech event, perhaps of our lifetime. This is where the rubber hits the road with the question of the First Amendment and free expression. This is where the rubber hits the road. Free speech is a meaningless concept.
All right, so a few things that I want to clarify. The people in the back are putting up the Black Power fist. They're not putting up, like, it's hard to tell from the video, especially in that kind of crowd. You don't know if people are raising one hand, what kind of salute they're doing. So that's what they were doing, and you can see the space between all the empty chairs, and that's the space between the protesters in the back that were separated by the chairs, separated by police, and then presumably supporters of Spencer who were in the front. We can't see them, any of them, but presumably they were there.
I have seen them. Snapchat has a map feature, which if you pinch your face when you're taking a selfie, you reveal the map. You then go to Gainesville right now, which is where the University of Florida is, and you can look all over campus. Today, all over campus of the University of Florida was a ghost town, except for the quick response forces, which are guys in tan, like long sleeve shirts.
Wait, really quick on that. I just want to. Right before the show, Kimberly Archer from University of Florida emailed me saying, "Can you cover this story? Like, this is crazy." She said that students were afraid to set foot on campus, and that a bunch of professors canceled classes because they were terrified of violence.
You can see
that's absurd.
You can see inside classrooms where multiple students have just posted like, "There's no one here today. I guess I didn't get the memo." But inside the event, you can also see someone posted a snap from the balcony looking down, and there's about 20. There's about 20 Richard Spencer people. Compare that to the scores of folks outside. Actually, Snapchat, they have like, they go together and they group different events and they give it a little title, and you can see a little thumbnail. It started with Richard Spencer event, and then they changed it to an edited featured video called, and it displaced the Richard Spencer event, and it was replaced with protesting racism at Gainesville.
Oh wow, yeah, I think
that's powerful.
I think it's interesting because a lot of folks did opt to not go, including folks who actually did want to attend the event, who were scared to attend the event. So a lot of folks opted to watch it online. I guess that was an option. So I think what this means symbolically is great, but it doesn't mean that folks still aren't interested in this message.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessary. I mean, we have seen clearly, like we saw at Charlottesville, we see online on a daily basis that folks are interested in this message, right? But what I think is really interesting, right, is that he, before the event, right, he wanted to essentially stifle like the freedom of the press, right? He wanted to pick and choose whom was allowed in the room and could cover the event. And then he claimed that during the speech, he said, "You're trying to stifle our free speech," while people were booing. And it's like, we also have freedom to protest, freedom to assemble. And it's like, just because you have free speech doesn't mean you have the freedom to be heard. Like, the problem is those voices are louder, thank God, than you. And you don't, that just because you can't be heard and you decided not to speak through the boos doesn't mean you still don't have freedom of speech. So sorry, not sorry.
The voices are so much louder than the folks he had there. He was selling tickets, and there is a small group in the front, which is completely just, dwarfed in numbers by the folks that are inside, outside. There, you can see people outside. They had some amazing chants, one of which was just "no violence." When things started to get testy, the crowd would chant "no violence." Things like, Richard Spencer, go home, Nazis not welcome here. There was someone translating the chants into sign language for people who were hearing impaired to say "you're welcome." And then all over campus, people had put up, fraternities had put up signs that said, we're about love and not hate. Someone had just printed out "you're loved" on a bunch of pieces of white paper, and it's all over campus. Someone went through and just panned around and showed all the outpouring of support, and it's in multiple languages, including German and English and Spanish.
Just in case someone wants to.
Yeah, just like
switch sides.
So I feel like we have the good guys have won here.
Sure.
The fight's not over, but it is impossible to say that Richard Spencer and the message of hate have won when there are so many positive voices out there who seem to, and this is as of the an hour ago, who seem to have kept it mellow and spread a message of love and told the Nazis that they're not welcome there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really profound, and I think that's very important. And just again, like you have the freedom to stand on a soapbox wherever you want and say what you want in this country. And I stand firmly behind freedom of speech, and I will protect that right, even if I don't agree with you. That said, we don't have to listen to you
or pay for it. Like universities need to consider some kind of logistical solution to funding, right, these kinds of forums, right? So I know he had to pay to rent this space. Should that cost be inclusive of the additional security that you require because you are this volatile public identity? You need to fit the bill for the added security and all the measures that we need to provide because you've decided that this is the space that you want to kind of present your ideas in. So
that's a really good point as well. The girl who emailed me, the viewer who emailed me, who is a student there, said, look, I'm paying for a service, presumably. I'm paying for an education. And now I'm also paying to have this person spew hateful rhetoric.
So there's a lot of talk about safe spaces in America. Because safe space is just a term.
Right.
People can use that term differently.
Sure. Right.
And I think a university is it should be a safe space for your body. You should be safe there.
Yeah.
It should be a safe space, not from ideas, but a safe space for the exchange of ideas.
Sure. Yes.
So when it comes to having Richard Spencer there, that I'm fine with him going and speaking. But it's such a weird dynamic that the president of the university can now say, well, he's in charge of so much because he essentially just paid to rent the space out.
Right. He paid to rent the space out, and then he chose his press. So if he's choosing which people are allowed in to cover it, wouldn't you say like that's sort of a safe space?
Yeah, absolutely. But the other thing is part of his strategy is to have this discussion specifically.
Right.
Now, I'm perfectly fine giving in to him having this discussion, or really any discussion, because our ideas are better than his. But he wants to have that discussion of, oh, everyone's mad that like this isn't getting covered right, and that they don't want me here. They're classifying me the same way as a hurricane. Other things that are part of his strategy is naming his think tanks called the National Policy Institute, which is so intellectually dishonest and frighteningly benign sounding.
Right.
I feel like
that's his shtick. He just changes like the names of awful. I mean, he's changed the neo-Nazi Nazi movement into the alt-right. That's his shtick. Is just like rebranding.
Yeah, and
he's a marketer.
Not just him. Yeah, he's avoiding like the common pitfalls of regular, average, garden variety, traditional white supremacists, which are like himself personally wearing swastikas. And there's one interview that I read about a guy, I think we all saw this, which was there's a guy who's like a more Nazi type white supremacist who said, he doesn't go as far as I want. He doesn't talk about the Zionist owned media as much. And he also his group has issued in advance of events guidelines for like how to dress nice, so people call us dapper.
Well, yeah, they're trying to expand the idea or the framework for what it means to present as a white supremacist, right? To again, kind of reduce the stigma of kind of these historical depictions that we have of white supremacists. But then, you walk down marching, hollering blood and soil with torches. Like you're calling on those past ghosts. So I think there is a way in which they are trying to again rebrand. And they're even being covered in that way. I remember Richard Spencer being like cast as somebody who was fashion forward, and it's like, okay, but his ideas are backwards. So like, where are we? Why are we doing this? So a ton of questions, a lot of nuance, I think, with this movement, and I think it's interesting that this is happening alongside the recent declaration that Black identity extremists are now the #1 like national terrorist threat, right? But this is the group where we've got to call,
Then we have to call a state of emergency.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's like, who really is the domestic security threat?
Yeah. There's one. Did we report the Alligator Brewery? The plan. There is a brewery in Gainesville, or around the University of Florida that said, all right, so Richard Spencer's coming to town. And ahead of that, he is selling tickets. Now, we at the Gator Brewery would like to tell you, since he has a limited number of tickets, go buy the tickets, bring them here, and we'll give you a free beer for every ticket that you bring.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Richard Spencer got wind of this and changed the time that he was selling tickets to closer to the actual time of the event, but they're still like.
They also tried to do some other like weird shady things with the ticket so that like people who were like real supporters would also have access, but like the protesters couldn't all just buy them out.
Make sure no bots are buying
But you didn't need to. He didn't have enough people to fill like an auditorium, and that's a good thing.
That's a very good thing. Yeah. All right, moving on. In the wake of the devastating wildfires in Northern California that have left 42 people dead and 200,000 acres completely destroyed, there are some right-wing websites that are blaming an undocumented immigrant for the fires in completely false and completely unsubstantiated headlines. So take a look at some of these. Breitbart said, ICE detainer issued for suspected wine country arsonist in Sonoma jail. So we have that one, and then we have this one here from American News 24/7. Report homeless arsonist behind California wildfire that killed 40 people is an illegal alien. So before I get into the story, no human is illegal, thank you very much. But these rumors flared after officials arrested a 29-year-old man in Maxwell Farms Regional Park last weekend. Now his name is Jesus Fabian Gonzalez, and he's a homeless man that is known to deputies. And he had started a fire to keep warm, all right? Now, according to the Sonoma County Sheriff, Rob Giordano, he says that there's a story out there that he's the arsonist in these fires, and he says that's not the case. There's no indication he's related to these fires at all. I wanted to kill that speculation right now, so we didn't have things running too far out of control. Now, before we get into some of the details of this fire that he started, that he admits to starting. He says that he started this fire to warm himself up. He tried to extinguish some of it, and then the deputies that found him extinguished the majority of the fire before even firefighters came up. This happened just on Tuesday, and then the Sonoma fires started over a week ago. So just timeline-wise, their facts are a little muddy. But they posted that on Monday that he had been arrested, but hours later, Breitbart and the right wing picked up the story, all right? But here's like the really, really interesting part about this story is that the Sonoma County Sheriff, Sergeant Spencer Crum, said that when he got calls from Breitbart News and InfoWars, all they asked about was Gonzalez's ethnicity and whether ICE had placed a detainer on him. They didn't ask any follow-up questions about whether or not they thought he was the arsonist. They just ran with that story. And then of course, people on Facebook, people on Twitter ran with this story. So there's this entire conspiracy theory that an undocumented immigrant was an arsonist, and that's why we can't have sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Nice scapegoat though.
Yeah, it's crazy how quickly it escalates.
Yeah.
You're talking, and how ironic it's a wildfire story that it just catches on that fast. And that's all they need is like, there are things that happen that they kind of have a filter out for. Oh, does it involve like a big story people are talking about? Is there anything that randomly kind of involves any other wedge issue we're trying to push? If they overlap ever, oh, now we have our spin on it. And then you see the way it goes from Breitbart to American 24.
How it travels.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate, and I think this story was receiving very little attention by conservative media until they could attach this narrative to it, which I think is just unfortunate, and I pine for the day we can return to objective reporting.
So I have been reading Breitbart, and I've been trying.
Are you okay? Do you need anything?
No, because I think it's important to understand what the other side is reading, right? And so I've been looking at it, and these articles are, and the headlines are so clickbaity, right? They do a very good job at making clickbaity articles. And so I've been clicking on them like, oh, no way this can be true. I get sucked into it too. No way this can be true. And then you click on it and you read the article, and oftentimes the article has nothing to do with the headline. And they'll say somebody, it's like when TMZ says, so-and-so like tells this bitch to like step off, and like the person did not say that in the interview. Like they just come up with BS explanations. And if they're banking on the fact that the readers aren't reading the article, that they're seeing the headline and sharing that. That's what they're banking on. Because if you look into these articles, they're oftentimes not even addressing the headline. They'll say that there's an arsonist, and they'll like imply that it's related to the Sonoma fires, but they don't go into and give any actual facts that it's there.
Yeah. Right, because even if you look at this one, it's like ICE detainer issued for suspected wine country arsonist in Sonoma jail. So the idea was someone called that there was a fire.
Right.
The location is wine country. This guy's did ICE issue a detainer? We don't know, but there's something happened there.
Diagramming a sentence. Where is the noun?
Yeah, but it's like it's all those words. That's the thing.
It's a formula.
They create a word cloud, and it's weird. Like there's this one. A while back, there was some kind of like New York Times thing about what happens at Breitbart, and very often they said that they cover their bases in a number of ways. They do. Salacious headlines, but if you come after them, technically the article doesn't have all those things that the headline implies.
They're very careful about
and
that.
They'll like hire people of the ethnicity that this one goes after.
Sure.
So they say they're like, I have a Muslim.
Yeah.
Instead of a Muslim friend, it's a Muslim editor. Like I have a lot of Muslim editors.
They vetted it, and it's fine.
It's frustrating. Something interesting that's happening in Italy. Is Italy on October 31st is going to start having it's 8,000 schools or something is going to have a fake news curriculum that they teach to their kids in partnership with Facebook and other companies like that. They are going to give
Facebook.
Kids right in partnership with Facebook. So Facebook, obviously, whether they're going out and earnestly trying to stop this, or it's a PR stunt. I don't care. I like that it's happening, and that's what happens when we all put pressure on people to act better.
Sure.
So they are going to launch this, and they're giving kids like a bunch of different things they can do when they see a story. And I like that they're doing it with kids. Because that's great. I want the children are our future. I think they should do it with grown-ups. Because I think one of the problems is like people think that if they see something in a headline format with an article after it, it's news. I feel like now it's just like so trite to say, but it's worth it saying they're having kids call experts, re-report the story and fix it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
No, I do think that's very important. I think that's amazing. Really quick, I want to go circle back to this story about the Sonoma wildfires, because even though some of these right-wing outlets tried to use undocumented immigrants as a scapegoat, people in Northern California, officials in Northern California have actually been very welcoming to undocumented immigrants, and they said that if they do go to shelters during this, there will be no ICE officials there. They said that they'll be safe and that they don't have to worry about that while they're fleeing the fires. So I do think that's important to note. We're gonna take a quick break right now, but we'll be right back and see you guys in a few.
Hey Dave, as you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crash.
I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
been easy for me. I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. All my life, I was told no.
He said I had small hands. They're not small. I never heard that one before.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Hannah here with Brett and Ambria. We're gonna do 2 more stories and then we're gonna take another break, but we'll be back after that. So for those of you guys that are watching online, stick around. And now we're just gonna jump right in. A 9-month-old baby who is being treated for aggressive brain cancer received a letter addressed to the infant from the insurance company saying that his coverage was denied. Now this is a picture here of the adorable Connor Richardson. And now the insurance company sent this little nugget, a letter that says, "Dear Connor Richardson, as HIP Health Plan of New York, we try hard to provide you with access to quality healthcare services that meet your needs. When we decide to deny coverage for treatment or service, we want to make sure you know why. We have decided to deny coverage for inpatient hospitalization to St. Jude Hospital from 10/4 to 10/10. We have determined that the services are not medically necessary." And then somewhere in the middle of the letter, they switch font and then they start talking to the parent in sort of a bizarre change of person. They say that your child is a 9-month-old boy who was diagnosed with a high-grade brain tumor. Your child was treated with surgical removal of his tumor at Stony Brook Hospital. After your son was discharged, you enrolled him in a clinical trial at St. Jude's Hospital. Evidence-based guidelines do not exist to confirm its effectiveness for his brain tumor. Therefore, this request for clinical trial treatment to St. Jude's Hospital is not medically necessary and is denied. Then they changed the typeface again and said, if you decide to have this service, you may have to pay it yourself, which is just a lovely message to send a 9-month-old boy who can't read it and who is suffering from aggressive brain cancer. But fortunately for this family, St. Jude is a rare medical institution that offers its services at no charge, even supplying patients and their families with transportation and food vouchers. Connor has embarked on his chemotherapy with no cause for his family to worry about the expense. So this story does have a semi-happy ending here, in that this child will continue to receive treatment and the parent don't have to worry about the exorbitant medical costs of undergoing this trial and undergoing chemotherapy. But this letter just shows you how messed up our healthcare system is and how badly we need single payer. I mean, it just is such a glaring example. When you see the face, can we show the baby again? Can we show, yeah. I mean, when you see that face and there's pictures of this like little, just sweetheart like glaring up at his father, it's just the sweetest thing. Like, I was reading this article and going through this and I was in tears, and it just made me so frustrated at the state of our healthcare in this country right now. And then I was, encouraged and happy to read the end about St. Jude's and how they carry on their medical services. But for babies around the country and people around the country, they're not so lucky.
Yeah, you said it changed font. What it changed font to was the only thing an individual contributed to this form letter. That's what's so annoying. Is it's so little of it has any personal impact, and some medical crisis like this is one of the most personal things you can go through. I mean, of course, personal, but like it is one of the most heart-wrenching, sensitive areas. And your healthcare provider to just swoop in and write the letter, "Dear 9-month-old baby."
Right. Yeah.
It makes you sick. It's very frustrating. I understand that there are limits to what a healthcare provider covers. Like, I get it. And I understand that there are certain experimental treatments that are so experimental and out of left field that a company's gonna say like, I'm not gonna cover your weird potion that you're putting together. That's what that's for. But this is St. Jude's, and this is St. Jude's using something that got to this level. So in the very minimum, they need to stop using the term medically necessary because it implies that it's not necessary medically to save this kid's life.
Right, and I think that's the issue that I have with the language, is that it's very conflicting, right? They argue that it's not medically necessary, but then also later argue that they're denying coverage because it's not medically effective, right? But then they call it a life-saving treatment.
Yeah.
So what is it, right? So you need to prove your case. You need to do it better, and it needs to be consistent, and also insert a little humanity inside of the letter, and that would also go a long way. But I think, again, it's carving out the boundaries for why you're not providing coverage for this child.
And one of the other frustrating things is it doesn't have really to be anything, because the only folks overseeing whether they're going to cover your insurance claim is someone who works inside and for an insurance company. And the only way they're gonna expand, contract, whatever their coverage is if they feel pressure from outside sources like you and me, or if they feel like it's gonna cost them money not to.
I mean, that's what this comes down to, and that's what's so frustrating is, like, I get that healthcare is a business, right? Like, I understand that component of it, but like at the same time, like, I don't know like how any sort of person with any sort of empathy or whatever could look at this case or look at so many cases and have just no care in the world and just be like, well, it doesn't help my bottom line. You know what I mean?
I think that's what it is.
That is what it is. This is like just like capitalism at its very, very worst.
Which is, and it's not fair because there is an inelastic demand for being alive.
Right, yeah.
Most things, if it's more expensive, I'm not gonna buy as much because like I don't want it enough.
Right.
But here, you never change how much you wanna be alive, theoretically. And so you'll pay literally infinite dollars in order to stay that way, and that's where they get you.
Yeah, and they're making these parents choose essentially between, I mean, luckily not in this case, but in so many cases, they make the parents essentially choose between like, pulling out a mortgage or whatever they have to do to afford these sorts of clinical trials or to afford to keep their child alive. I mean, to really put that burden and to put that decision on a parent or anybody to stay alive, to help sick kids or whomever is so wrong.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's just, it's infuriating. And like, I mean, I do want to get into the fact that we can avoid something like this with a single payer system, right? Like if the government presumably is helping fund some of these things, it won't be up to these private insurance companies to then get to deem, oh, this doesn't help our bottom line, right? Then everybody is essentially taken care of.
It depends on your faith in the system.
Sure.
Because there might also, single payer, you can say single payer, it is all about the execution of any thing. I support, I mean, my friends who are from countries that have single payer say, no, it's awesome. Like you show up and that's it. And you leave with medicine and it's great.
Yeah.
So you can execute it right. We need to get to something that's better than this.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. We do need we should figure it out because I think there's stories like this, right? We can talk about healthcare, we can watch debates on healthcare and all of that stuff. But I think when you have more tangible stories and you make it a little bit more human, then hopefully these sorts of stories can hit home a little more, and people can start to understand the necessity of this, the urgency of this.
Yeah.
And hopefully our administration will act accordingly. I mean, when we're looking at like how the administration is dealing with healthcare now and how they're trying to reduce subsidies and things like that, it's very frustrating to watch.
That's what kills you is, I mean, literally,
yeah, literally it kills you.
And the lack of any consistent message telling us like this is our strategy for moving forward on healthcare. Right now, it's just someone who says like, we need a new deal. And in the meantime, I'm gonna break the toy I have.
Sure, yeah, there is no effective strategy and there is no effective leadership that's kind of guiding this process, which is unfortunate.
Yes. All right, guys, we are gonna come back in a minute for those of you that are watching online. We'll come back with a few stories, one of which is my favorite story of the day, that some women have some guidance for you as to how to avoid sexual harassment and abuse. So you're gonna wanna stay tuned for that because I have some pretty heated opinions on it. So stick around for that. And France is making a new law that might fine cat collars, which I think we could use in this country as well. We'll see you guys right after the break. Young Turks, and we're gonna jump into this next story. While it may seem that every woman on your newsfeed has come out with her own Me Too story in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein scandal, some women have advice for other women as to how to avoid sexual harassment or sexual abuse, and that's to stop asking for it with the way that you dress. According to Representative Eddie Bernice Johnson, who is a Democrat in Texas, she said that she grew up in a time when it was as much the woman's responsibility as it was a man's. How you were dressed, what your behavior was. I'm from the old school that you can have behaviors that appear to be inviting. It can be interpreted as such. That's the responsibility, I think, of the female. She then goes on to say, I think we also need to start talking about the power that women have to control the situation. There's law enforcement. You can refuse to cooperate with that kind of behavior. I think that many times men get away with this because they are allowed to get away with it by the women. And this isn't the only woman that's come out with some rhetoric like this. In fact, if you remember last week, Big Bang Theory's Mayim Bialik wrote an op-ed for the New York Times. Now, I will say a disclaimer that she has apologized for it since. But in that op-ed, she writes, I have decided that my sexual self is best reserved for private situations with those I am most intimate with. I dress modestly. I don't act flirtatiously with men as a policy. And this was her going on to explain why she herself has not been sexually assaulted. And another woman who has also apologized profusely, Donna Karen, during an interview said, you look at everything all over the world today and how women are dressing and what they're asking by just presenting themselves the way they do. What are they asking for? Trouble. So before we jump into, I think, some of the specifics of these quotes and how messed up they are and how they illustrate how ingrained some of these power dynamics and sexist beliefs and victim blaming are in our society and in our culture, I would just like to say for all the women and for all the men out there, it does not matter how naked you are or how revealing you are dressed or how sexual you are. That is not providing consent to touch my body. That is not providing consent to abuse my body. That is not providing consent to make salacious comments about my body. And so for these women to perpetuate these old school beliefs that were effed up then and are effed up now is really disappointing. But it shows you how ingrained, even in women, these sorts of ideals and these sorts of notions can become and have become.
I mean, yes. The Eddie Redmayne Johnson, whatever her name is, Eddie Bernice Johnson.
Yes.
Not Eddie Redmayne, who's an actor.
Yes.
Really talented actor. Is essentially just saying, guys rape. You know they rape and it's in there, they do it. And if you don't want them to rape you, just wear a sweater. Like that's what she's saying. And that's messed up. What I think, like you try to wade through for the sensical thing in the nonsensical thing. So there's two different, there's like the way things are and handling that. And then there should be a, let's get to the way things should be. And whenever I hear the way that women I know deal with the way things are, it makes me really sad.
Yes.
My friend Olivia lived in San Francisco, and every day, like the way she would walk around in San Francisco, she'd have to wear a hoodie, sunglasses, and headphones, even though she wasn't listening to anything.
Yeah.
So she could pretend not to hear it.
But you also have to be self-aware in case someone does try to attack you.
You have to have your headphones down because you have to be listening for what's going on around you. I mean, when you think about the cognitive resources that you use on a daily basis as a woman to avoid any sort of sexual harassment, any sort of sexual assault, it is absurd. Like I could walk you through my day. Like I didn't go for a run this morning outside because it got light later in the day. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, I'm taking that protective measure because that's the reality of the world that we live in. But if God forbid something was gonna happen while I was on a run, for anybody to say, well, you shouldn't have run in the dark, like F you. Like I should be able to do that. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do that. And I made the choice not to do that. But then like, there's not a single day that like I've parked not in the parking lot of our studio, I've parked around the block or something like that. Every single time I've parked around the block, I've been harassed without fail. without fail.
My wife doesn't go to the beach alone. She just doesn't, because she can't. Just because of, and it's like I don't know. It's not even like it's connected with like necessarily with like the desire of a guy to have sex with her. It's just this weird presumption that you just can, that you can just yell at her. I don't like it. There's also this thing about like, a lot of folks have said like, you don't need a daughter to say like, oh, I have a daughter, so now I can speak with it. But there are folks who go after that person. My response is, I don't care how you got there. I don't care if it took having a daughter. I don't care if it took having a wife.
Right.
It shouldn't take having a daughter.
That. You should just be human.
But just get there.
Yeah.
Let's all get there. Eddie, Representative Johnson, get there.
Yeah, and I just really quick, I just want to talk about a few things within her statement. Talking about law enforcement, there's a ton of reasons why women don't go to law enforcement, because they're oftentimes not believed, they're oftentimes intimidated, they're oftentimes fearful of retaliation. You can refuse to cooperate with that kind of behavior. Yeah, of course you can refuse to cooperate, but if you listen to the Harvey Weinstein tape, you can hear him coercing, you can hear her trying to refuse. Also, there's this thing called rape where people force themselves upon you. And so even if you're refusing to cooperate, it still can happen to you.
Sure, and men have found myriad ways to sexually harass women that don't kind of fit into this box of what we understand as rape, right? With the Weinstein case in terms of like masturbating in the room while they're, you know what I mean? So there are a number of ways in which you can assault my personhood that don't, fit into this framework of what we understand as rape, and that's why they're having a hard time prosecuting a lot of these cases because we have a narrow definition of what sexual assault is. And just to the earlier point, I think women already understand the undue burden of like self-protection.
Yeah.
So I think these op-eds from Miriam and this statement from, Bernice is just problematic and very much disconnected from a progressive gender politic. Miriam is interesting because we see that this generational blossom, because we see this generational detachment, right? So Bernice is 50s, and here we are in this modern time, and she's kind of espousing some of the same beliefs that this woman a generation before her. It's the same argument.
Yeah. Well, and I think some of that, as she goes into the article, she goes in the op-ed that she learned that from her parents. And I do think that comes from the generation prior. I remember I was on a field trip when I was in 8th grade, and I was on a field trip with my class, and this man came and groped me. And I told the teacher, because I was terrified as a 13-year-old, and she was like, well, you are wearing shorts. That's what I was told as an 8th grader, that I was wearing, oh, well, you decided to wear shorts. Like, no, that's not what we should be telling young girls. That is so beyond messed up, and we need to move past that as a society.
Sure.
We really,
shift the messaging to what boys need to learn, what men need to learn about women's bodies and their access to women's bodies, so that women aren't consistently problematized for just being, for just existing and making choices.
Yeah, that's what she's saying is like, oh, you can refuse to cooperate. It's like, no, like I go about my day, I'm not doing anything. I'm consistently sexually harassed on Twitter and on my Instagram. I'm not cooperating with that.
Right, you don't even
I'm minding my own business.
Yeah, you don't even have to physically be in the space to be sexualized, right? So again, this is a nuanced conversation that we need to nuance our thoughts about how we approach it, because it's ridiculous, this arcane notion that, my skirt was too short, so Bill came on to me. It's like, that's not, wholly how sexual harassment and assault operates.
Yeah, people are assaulted in short skirts and they're assaulted in ski suits. Unfortunately, that's just how it happens. Moving on. France is looking to make catcalling a crime and fine offenders. Now on Monday, October 16th, Marlene Schiappa, France's junior minister of gender equality, said that France was exploring the idea of fining individuals for street sexual harassment and how much the fines would cost. Now Schiappa said the government was going to consult with professionals on the legalities of such a proposal and create workshops for citizens across the country. Now this all came about after France's version of the hashtag #MeToo, but their hashtag was expose your pig. because France is awesome. Because France is awesome. So, they haven't obviously made this into law yet, but they're looking into it. And I don't know how it would be enforced, right? I mean, presumably, if you are being catcalled and you're on the street, next to a man and you confront him, that's a danger, right? Or, staying nearby and calling the police, that's also a danger because you're presenting a physical danger for yourself. So I'm not sure how this would work practically, but I do think it's important to recognize that they're trying to take steps into the right direction.
Legally, a lot of this is covered in American law. Legally, it should technically, you're protected against this kind of behavior. Usually it's under a disturbing the peace statute. New York, for example, I mean, the wording of these are pretty hilarious, but I mean, they're strange. It's like obscene language or gestures in public. If they do it at least twice, they're up for a $250 fine and 15 days in jail. Alaska, Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Kentucky, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania, it's illegal to follow people. It's not illegal to catcall them or do what I just said happens in New York, which is illegal, but you can't follow people. DC, abusive language or conduct or disturbing a person's path. So a lot of these places have this is nebulous idea. So the law is on the books in a lot of places.
Yeah.
But the ability to then document that effectively, go to a police officer and tell them that's what happened, that's another story.
Yeah, I think that's the question is like, how do you operationalize these kinds of laws? And I think there are other models for kind of how to implement this. I think Portugal has like some stuff on the books and Belgium. So France has models to kind of frame this legislation around, but again, how do you do it? I do think there is something to having these offenses categorized under sexual harassment or sexual assault as opposed to
disturbing the peace.
Because I think it creates, a framework for kind of understanding that these are gender-based offenses, right? Like, and I think might stigmatize some of the offenders. And I wish there was a way to make it like public record, so you could
that's interesting.
So you could like look up before you go on a date with someone. How many times have they catcalled?
Like, does everyone need a body cam? To be like, all right, here's my trip today.
Yeah, how do you exactly
walking around? And in Iowa or in Hawaii, it's like after you tell them to stop and they don't, they're up for $1,000 and 30 days in prison. Here's my video from my body camera.
But guess what? Telling somebody to stop while you're on the street, whether you're by yourself, is a real danger. Like that's something that can be very like if you're in already an intimidating situation, already having sort of that like precursor to before you can get to the next step is problematic in itself. Because if I'm on the street and there's a man coming towards me who's probably got another 100 pounds on me, you know what I mean, is twice my size, and he says something inappropriate to me, and I don't necessarily see that I have a safety net of people around me with eyes or could hear me or whatever, and I tell him to stop, I'm putting myself in a really precarious situation.
Yeah, I think women learn to de-escalate, right? As uncomfortable as those situations are, we learn to de-escalate for fear of, violent encounters. So I wonder, like, who would be trained? Like, are cops supposed to intervene when they see this happening? Like, because I don't trust that at all.
I've had cops catcall me.
Right. So it's like, how do you operationalize this, and how do you train folks to kind of identify that it's happening? Is this something that we collectively do as citizens, like calling it out?
Yeah.
Right now is a watershed moment, hopefully, in this all. In that the Harvey Weinstein thing's in the zeitgeist today. We covered 2 stories. I hope it continues this way.
Yeah.
But the sad part about that is like, well, then we have to expose more and more stuff that has happened.
Right.
But I think collectively we all understand it happens a whole hell of a lot.
Of course.
All the time, multiple times on your street a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, one of my favorite things that has come out of this, like, of the Harvey Weinstein thing is that more people are realizing how ubiquitous it is, right? Like, I've had guys be like, wait, like, I know guys that have been accused of this. I'm like, I know you may know that one guy, but you probably know a lot more. You just don't know that they do it. Like, my guess is a big portion of your friends do it because it's so common.
The problem now, one of the many problems, is that with that thing we talked about in a previous story about Representative Johnson, is that the women are afraid and the guys aren't. They aren't afraid of any consequence. And there is no fear of consequence. So whatever we need to do to up, I think, the fear of consequence, at the very least, in addition to just raising people better, that's gonna take, so there's long-term, there's short-term things we can do, and a renewed push in litigating against these kinds of things, making sure they go through. There's so many people who are complicit in this, who have let it go on for so long.
Including our education secretary, who is, on college campuses, right? Like this is pervasive everywhere, and it's not just the guys who are assaulting women. It's you and your comments on the street, right? It's the little ways that you perpetuate it, and the thoughts and the comments and the ways that you make women uncomfortable that you may not be aware of, or that you actively may be aware of, that you need to start to work on, because that contributes to, like, men need to hold other men accountable for their behavior, and I think that would go a long way.
Yeah, I agree. All right, last story of the day.
The most important.
So in case scrolling through Twitter sometimes makes you sad at the state of the world, there's a new conspiracy theory spreading on the site that might bring a smile to your face or make you even more sad. I don't actually know. But apparently some people think that Melania has a body double. Now this theory was first put forth by a woman on Twitter named Andrea Wagner Barton. And she came up with this theory because of a video that she saw of President Trump speaking next to Melania. Let's take a look at that video.
A very big statement. We will be doing that. My wife, Melania, who happens to be right here, finds that subject to be of such vital importance, and she's very much involved. And as you know, she's on the committee and really wants to be involved in that process. Yes. Yes. They would love me to stay in, only for one reason. Look at the kind of money that's being sent. Iran is spending money in various countries. And I've always said it, and I say to them, don't do anything, don't worry about it. Take all the money you can get. They're all friends of mine. Actually, Emmanuel called up and he talked to me. And
All right, so who knows? I think it's Melania, but I do enjoy a good conspiracy theory now and then. Now, Andrea Wagner Barton says that she thinks that's a decoy that stood in for Melania because she wonders why on earth he would say, my wife Melania, who happens to be standing right here.
That's me. I am that person for sure.
I think he said it because this is his feeble attempt at trying to be gender aware. I'm not going to speak for her.
Oh
She's
Trump
here.
is trying to be gender aware.
Well, no,
totally,
I think trying to signal.
Right.
Because that's how I read it. I was like, why not just let her say that she represents this organization? But instead, you're speaking for her yet again.
She always looks like she's hiding.
Yes.
Well, let's look at the image real quick here of her in the sunglasses compared to her not in sunglasses. So it's her, right? I can see why people think it looks different, but it's her.
It's her, yeah.
There are photos. There are photos from later in the day where you see it is obviously Melania wearing the same outfit, but we don't see her take the sunglasses off. So I think once Melania was available, the body double left, and the real Melania came in. The question is with the glasses. I think she wears such heavy glasses. They're awesome.
Her.
She looks great. I don't want to say it's very stylish, but the heaviness of the glasses kind of pushes the nose out.
Yeah.
Or it's just creating a weird, shadowy light, or maybe her contour makeup artist just didn't contour her nose that day.
The bevel,
that might be what it
is shining light on the bridge of her nose. We're getting bevel glare.
No, I think the biggest thing from watching this video is that they are completely not. They're not a couple. They're not attuned to each other. He's like, this is what my speech says. My wife Melania. Oh yes, this is her as well. He doesn't even know how to interact with her in a normal way.
Who loves me very much.
Yes, I paid her a lot to say that.
I don't creep her out like I creep everyone out. No, that's not the case.
They don't. The fact that she did the briefing in the sunglasses, I thought was ridiculous. That was my comment the whole time. I was like, this is so, like, you are the first lady. Like, you can't just do what you
want. She's got
want.
like a trench coat on and the full sunglasses. Felt like, okay, yeah. Incognito.
She's reading this story and she's like, can we do that?
Yeah, can I get a body double? Because I don't want to stand next to him for the next however many years.
To be anywhere but near him.
Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah, that's great. That's lovely. All right, guys, that is our show for today. For members, you can stick around and watch the post game, which will be coming up. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but we'll find something fun to talk about. For the rest of you, we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.